Hi there everyone, this is Bobby with Cross IT. Today we are going to be doing a demonstration and live coding session using the Claris Connect product. For those of you who do not know what Claris Connect is, it is a cloud-based integration platform that allows you to create entire workflows by connecting all of your applications in one spot. So the first thing you'll notice about Claris Connect is it is web-based, and it is a cloud-based platform and service. So there's no desktop application, there's nothing you need to download. All you need is a valid license and a FileMaker ID, and then you just go to connect.claris.com and you will log in and you will be brought to this page. This page is your company's dashboard for Claris Connect. By default, it will show you all of your projects. Now, projects are the organizational grouping for your flows. Flows are where the action happens and where you can connect your different apps together. Projects are how you group those into meaningful groups. The other thing that is on here is a templates tab. Templates are pre-built starters for your Claris projects. Just like the FileMaker app, which is another Claris product, has starter solutions, Claris Connect has templates that make it easier and quicker to get started. Right now there's only 4. We anticipate that number to grow as the product grows. I'm going to hop back to my projects. This is where I will be doing most of the work today in this demo. I will be building a flow that will be triggered by an action within a FileMaker-based CRM. CRM standing for Customer Relationship Manager. Once the flow is triggered, it will push contact information within that CRM to my Outlook contacts. As we can see here, I have a project set up called FM Demo April 2020. That is the project we will be using. Just so you know, to create a project, you would just click this plus. You would hit Create New or Create from Template. Since I already have a project created for this, I'm just going to click here. And I will be navigated to the project detail page. Now, on the project detail page, there's a couple different sections. By default, you are brought to the flows section for that project. There's also spots for approvals, webhooks, and sharing. We are not going to get into those today. Today we are focusing exclusively on the flows. So I'm going to click Create New Flow to get started. It will prompt me for a name. And I'm just going to call it Demo FM to Outlook Contact. I like to try and be descriptive with my names. Of course, when you're creating your own flows, you could name them, whatever is appropriate for your use case. I'm going to hit Create. This is really where you set up your flow and add in all the juicy details of how it works. So I'm going to do a quick review of a couple key features on this page. Up here you have a couple different tabs within your flow. You have the Edit tab, that's where you can edit your flow. You have a History tab. This is where you can see the history of when that flow has been run. It will include any errors that happen, and if it's successful, it will indicate that as well. Here you have a tab for settings. These are settings specific to your flow. And then over here you have versions. This will show you a very brief edit log for your flow, indicating when things were changed, and there's some metadata there about what changed. Up here you have a button for whether or not your flow is enabled or disabled, meaning whether it's actually running or not. And then down here is really where you can configure your flow. Right up here, as I create my flow, steps will appear. And then down below will be the options. Specifically, you have all of your utilities. So these are internal to Claris Connect. Things like cryptography, calculations, variable setting, all that's included right here. And down below, you have all of your connector apps. These are the third-party applications that Claris Connect is pre-configured to connect to. For each connector, if you hover over it, there'll be a little eye. If you click that eye, you will get more information about what that application and connector is, and also what you could do with it. In general, every flow has two parts. It has a trigger and an action, or series of actions. And so each connector app is pre-configured to work as certain triggers or to perform different actions. So if I go down to Twilio, which is a texting, SMS, phone web-based service, we could see that it has a couple different triggers that can be triggered from within its own service. And so if that trigger occurs, then it will queue to Claris Connect that this specific flow needs to start. And there's also a couple actions that, again, are pre-configured to be performed from within Claris Connect. For the purposes of our demo, I'm going to click FileMaker Server 18 as my trigger because I want to start from within FileMaker. So whenever you click on an app, it will give you a list of what actions or triggers it could do, and you'll have to select one. In this case, since FileMaker only has one thing that it can be triggered by, it's pre-selected. So I'm hit continue. The next thing we'll ask you to do is to connect to an instance of that app, meaning you'll have to type in your username and password. Now, if you've already connected to an application previously, options to connect again to that same instance will appear here. Now, in this case, I haven't configured a connection to a FileMaker server, so it's prompting me to connect to a new account. I will click that. It will prompt me for a FileMaker server name, which I, of course, typed in our development server here at Cross. And then it will prompt me for a username, password, and database. Now, little thing to be aware of when configuring this for FileMaker. One, the username and password you type in will need to exist within the database that you are trying to connect to. And you will also need to make sure that that account is configured properly to be able to access the appropriate data and whatever you might want to see. Let's see if I remember my password correctly. And then in this case, since we are trying to connect to our test CRM that we have, I typed in crosscontact_cc, which is the name of the database on our innovations.crossit.com server. So I'm hit sign in. We'll see if I remember my password correctly. Keeping my fingers crossed. Uh-oh. All right, so we are good. Took a little extra second. Whew. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to rename this server. Just so that in the future, when I come back to look at this, I know exactly what I'm connecting to. So I renamed the connection, and so that way, as I add more connections, it's very clear what I'm connecting to. All right, so I hit continue. All right, so I selected my action. I've configured my account. Now, Claris wants me to test the connection that I configured. And so there are steps here for how you can test out what we're trying to do using a FileMaker action as a trigger for within Claris Connect. So I'm going to hop over here to my CRM. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-S, which opens the workspace. And based on the instructions that were listed, it's going to tell me to create a script to run the steps that's specified. So I'm just creating the script right now. Alright, so let's see what it tells me to do. So it tells me I need a set variable with some JSON data. So I could just copy and paste that right in. And then, what else does it say? Add any data you want to send to connect. Alright, so I'll need to make sure that in my variable I set that I put in the appropriate data. I could then use that variable in a insert from URL script step that includes this within the curl options. And this would be the actual URL that's called. So I'm going to hit copy. And I've actually done this before, and I like to be efficient / lazy. There's a fine line between the two, I suppose. And since I already have it pre-configured for what I want to do, I'm just going to copy in the new link, which I apparently did not. Let's hit copy. Okay. So I have my new link in there. Here is the setting of the variable. So this would be this step right here. I guess actually technically these steps number 3 and 4, where I have a variable that has this in it. And then it also has some data that I want to pass to Claris Connect. Again, what we're trying to do is push data to my Outlook contacts. And so this is that data right there. So I have a name with a first name for my FileMaker database. I have a last key field that contains last name of a person, and then I have email as well. So that's the first step. And then once you have that, you can use that within the insert from URL call, which we can just go over briefly here. Again, we have the URL that I copied from here. And in the curl options, I literally copied and pasted this, and I got it to work. So they kind of guide you through it, which is nice, because I don't know anything about curl personally, or CURL. Hopefully it's curl. All right, so I have my script. I followed the instructions. Now I'm going to run the script. And what that will do is that will, one, test that connection, kind of see how I did. And then the other thing it will do is it will pass this data, which will become important in our next step. So I'm just going to run it by clicking the play button. Nothing happened, but one thing I did set up is I had the result of the insert from URL call go into a global field. So if I go into my data viewer and I check out the result, it says, okay, that's good, hopefully. And of course, if I do go back to my Claris Connect instance, this Save Trigger button is now lit up. It says connection complete. So I'm going to hit Save Trigger. And now we have our trigger for our flow. this is the first step in setting up any flow, is getting a trigger to actually start it. So I have my flow, I have a trigger. Now I need to add stuff to my flow to actually do something. So I'm going to click this plus button, and you can see here there's a couple options for things I could add. Obviously there are actions, but Claris also included a couple logical steps that we could perform. So we could include if-then branching logic, which can be very useful, especially if we are doing some sort of error capturing within our flow. There's also options for repeat and an option to stop the flow, which again, if there's some sort of error, will become extremely useful. For the purposes of this demo though, we're just going to create an action. And like I mentioned previously, as I start adding things, they will stay up here. And then we again are shown our list of all the things we could do for whatever step we're configuring. The difference though now is it is showing me my apps. So I configured a connection to the FileMaker server, and it is showing that as a specific option. And then you'll notice too, a lot of these squares that were grayed out previously are now lit up because I can use them now for actions instead of a trigger, which is what we had set up in the previous step. Again, our goal is to push data to my Outlook instance. So I'm going to go down and select Office 365 because that is the service that runs my email. When we click on that, we are greeted with a lot more things we could do. And so these are all things that are supported that we can do. You can see there's quite a list. And I am going to find the create contact. It's already selected. Look at that. Okay. So I have create contact selected for my action. I'm going to hit continue. Again, it's going to ask me to connect an account for that application. Again, if I already had an account configured, that would show up here for me to choose. Alrighty. Again, and it pops up a nice little window. This is a work or a school account. I will type in my password. Again, hopefully I remembered it correctly. We shall see. I clicked yes for staying signed in. I'm not sure if that makes a difference or not. But hey, look, it successfully connected. So I'm going to hit continue. So I selected Office 365 as my connector I want to use in this action. I chose the action of creating a contact. I connected to my instance, my actual account, and now I'm going to configure the step. And each of these steps is unique. Again, because of the nature of Claris Connect, all these actions have to be pre-configured. So depending on if you are doing a different action, you will see different options. In this case, for the contact creation, it asks me for a display name, a given name, a surname, and then there are options down here for different things. If you remember, when we set up our script step, or I'm sorry, our script trigger step, I mentioned that having the data in here when we set it up is important and will help us later on. So this is where it will help us. So when we hit play earlier from here, it actually tested the insert from URL. And one of the things it did is it passed the data to this step. purely for testing. Obviously, once it's in production, it would actually pass the data, but having it pass the data you want it to during the initial setup means that when you're at this step and you want to use the data that gets passed, you could select it. I'm going to hop back for a brief second. So I have the fields that I want. I could just type in generic information, but then, for instance, I typed in my name, Bobby. If I were to do that, that would mean that every time this flow runs, it would create a contact's name with Bobby, and I don't want that. I want it to create a contact with the data that I passed it, so I can click here. And when you do that, you will get a list of metadata from all the previous scripts, or not script steps, all the previous steps that you performed. In this case, we only performed one step prior to this that would return relevant information, and that is the script trigger for Claris Connect that got run. And again, because when we set up the trigger and tested it, we passed it the data that we wanted, that data is included here as an option. So just to make that even more clear, if I had not included this when I initially set up the trigger, this information, name, last, and email, would not be there. So I always like to make sure the data I want to send is in the initial configuration call. Since I'm putting in display name, I'm going to put first and last. And it did that. For given name, I'm just going to put Robert. And then surname, which in this case is optional because there's no asterisk, I am going to put my last name. Right now, I'm not going to worry about email addresses. We're just going to do name. So I'm going to hit review and test. Now, key thing about when you hit review and test, it will actually perform that action. So if I were to go into my contacts within my email now, we would see a contact for Robert Ritz in there. All right. I'm sorry, that would happen after I hit test action. All right, so when you hit test action, one of the things that happens is it does give you a Json response with appropriate metadata. So this is actually what got returned from Outlook 365. This will vary depending on what app you're connecting to. So don't think this isn't. It will vary. The data in here will be quite different, actually. Since I was connecting to Office 365's contact portion, all that metadata is related to the individual contact that I created. If there was some error, there'd be a different status and probably different JSON data that got returned. A quick thing just to be aware of: if I were to try to edit this contact that I just created using Claris Connect, this ID would be how I would find them. Just a little informative thing that had taken me a while to figure out, so I figured I'd let you guys know. So I tested out my step. I'm going to hit save. And now within my flow, I have a trigger to trigger the flow, and I have an action that is performed by that flow. For now, I think that's all I'm going to do. I could certainly do more. I could build in some error trapping so that if an error message is returned from this, I can take appropriate actions. I could maybe configure something that it could send me a text message when a contact is created if I wanted to, or an email message. There's lots of things I could do from here, and we could go down a very, very deep rabbit hole if we want to explore all those options. And I do hope to explore all those options in further videos, but for right now, I think we are good. So the final step is we need to enable the flow. So it will ask you, so when you hit enable, it will ask you, do you want to enable flow history for this project, which is a log with each flow for the past 30 days. I'm going to go ahead and hit enable. And from the perspective of Claris Connect, that is all we need to get the flow set up. Now, because of the nature of the example I'm using, there is one final step that I will have to do. So I have this script that is set up to trigger my flow. I now need to attach that script to a button somewhere so that I can actually use it, right? So I'm going to navigate over here to our CRM. I have a button here specifically for that purpose from past demos that we have done. I'm going to go into layout mode within FileMaker by hitting Command Alt. That will bring me into layout mode. I have my inspector here. I have my object picker. I'm going to select that button, double click on it, maybe. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to make it perform that script that we just created. I'm going to hit Command S to save the change I just made, Command B to go back into my browser. And here is the moment of truth. We shall see if it works. If I click this button, I should now have a Bart Simpson in my contact section. I just navigate over to the people section of my Outlook, and there's Bart Simpson. So it worked, and if I had included any other metadata, that would show up here as well. One final thing, I am going to check the history on the call that we made, and it was in fact successful. So it shows success. There's a little green dot, shows what version is running, it shows the name of the flow, shows the date, time, and it does, if I click additional info, it gives me some of that, the actual steps that were run. So that way, as your flow changes, you can actually see the steps that were done at that specific time, which is very nice. And I believe that is it. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned for future videos. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of our other FileMaker developers and Claris Connect specialists at FileMaker@crossit.com. We are an FBA Platinum member. Otherwise, stay safe out there, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.